Hello, everyone. Welcome to fifth episode of Mind Matters. I'm Tanuj Sharma, co-founder and CEO of Kana Health, where we aim to empower therapists through AI-based solutions to really deliver personalized and effective care. Today, we are diving into a topic that's deeply personal for many, depression. Depression isn't just sadness, it's a complex mental health state that can affect almost every aspect of our lives. And to help us unpack this, I'm joined by the incredible Nidhi Kaul, a licensed therapist and executive coach. Nidhi, it's my pleasure to have you back on the show today.
Thanks, Thanuj. I'm glad to be here. And, depression is a very critical topic. So many people in the world experience it in all ages, genders, backgrounds. And so I really hope that today's episode can help some of our listeners.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in, Nidhi. Let's start at the core. Depression is a word which we hear often, right? But it's infrequently misunderstood. Would you be able to explain what depression really is and how does it differ from just, feeling low or down in life?
Yeah, absolutely, Thanuj. Feeling down or sad is a part of being human. Everyone experiences sadness at some point in their life. But clinical depression is more than that. It's a persistent feeling of sadness or a lack of interest in one's enjoyable things. And it lasts for at least 2 weeks, and it's accompanied by other symptoms that cause an impairment in daily functioning. And it's not just something that people can snap out of. Um, Often it's linked to a external stressor, but there are times that it's not. And it's really a combination of factors that influence whether a person experiences depression, such as biological factors, psychological factors, and environmental influences.
No, absolutely spot on. And, that's such a important distinction that depression isn't just a mood or a natural response to a difficult situation. It's a state, it's a disorder which requires specific attention and specific care. Nidhi, you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, what I want to highlight today is that, we're talking about major depressive disorder, but there are other forms of clinical depression that people may experience, such as persistent depressive disorder, seasonal affective disorder, and postpartum depression. And the symptoms do vary for all of these. So I just want to highlight that that's today our episode is about major depressive disorder.
No, absolutely, right? And that kind of is perfect segue for us to talk about that how do you really recognize depression, right? Because depression can sometimes be very hard to identify or recognize even in ourselves, right? What are those some of those key signs that someone might be experiencing depression to look out for?
Sure, great question, Thanuj. So we can break down the symptoms into three categories, and they are emotional symptoms, cognitive symptoms, and physical symptoms that a person can experience. And so those emotional symptoms could include feeling down, feeling of lack of interest in one's pleasurable activities, feeling decrease in motivation, feeling emotionally numb or detached, or having self-loathing or feelings of worthlessness or hopelessness, irritability, anger. And that's often what people experience, kind of like a amalgamation of those symptoms. And then there's the cognitive component of depressive disorder, which is that you might have persistent negative thought patterns, like believing the world is hopeless or having an inability to see any positives in life, maybe difficulty focusing and difficulty making decisions. And then there's the physical symptoms, like fatigue, even after a good night of rest, or insomnia, or where you feel like you're sleeping for 10, 12 hours in the night, and then you're sleeping during the day as well. So, kind of an excessive amount of sleep. You might notice a change in appetite. Might have some headaches or digestive issues like diarrhea or constipation, or you might notice that the person or yourself is speaking or moving slower than usual. And a depressive disorder can even influence your sex drive and reduce it.
Hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, it is interesting that it can, manifest physically too.
Mhm.
And probably most of the, people, generally miss out on those physical symptoms. And I can imagine that, it makes it even harder for people to connect those dots and realize that they're actually dealing with depression.
Absolutely. And, at times these symptoms are triggered by medical or hormonal imbalances. So it's really important to address these symptoms both with a mental health professional as well as a primary care physician.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the personal and social impact of depression. Depression can affect almost every aspect of life. And, let's also talk about how does it typically impact someone's personal relationship or their work life or their social life, broadly.
Yeah, it can be devastating, Thanuj. Often people with depression report that it's a struggle to get out of bed, to go to work, or to take care of basic self care tasks like eating or brushing their teeth or showering.
Hmm.
And they may find themselves withdrawing from loved ones, feeling really misunderstood, or they struggle to maintain the connections that they have. And at work, it can affect productivity. Decision making is difficult, and collaborating with others might be a challenge as well. And so, depression often creates this cycle where people feel stuck and unable to meet expectations, which then reinforces their feelings of guilt or worthlessness and makes it challenging to maintain relationships, to hold a job, or to perform any regular activity.
Wow, I mean, that sounds like a tough cycle to break from, right? It's so important for people to realize that they're not alone in facing this.
Yeah, exactly. And, during the darkest moments, it often feels like that to them, that they're the only one facing the struggle. And that sense of isolation can be really overwhelming. So, when you feel like you don't fit in or that you're alone, it makes a challenging situation even more painful experience.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those myths and misconceptions too, because we know there is a lot of stigma around depression, right? People refuse to talk about it. Nidhi, in your perspective, what are some of those myths, which you would like to bust today for our listeners?
Yeah, well, there are quite a few, Thanuj, but one big one is that depression is just people being lazy or that it's a sign of weakness. And neither of those are true. It's actually a medical condition. And then, another myth is that antidepressants are the only solution for treatment. But therapy and lifestyle changes are actually quite effective. And so I think those are the most common myths that need to be dispelled.
Yeah. You know that antidepressant is such a popular myth out there. People believe that, those are the pills which can only help. And they generally kind of undervalue the impact of therapy can have in treating some of these disorders. And it is so important for people to realize that depression is a medical condition which can be solved in a lot of different ways as well. And therapy is one of those most effective treatments around.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So in terms of the treatment options, now that we are talking about it, right, it's not just antidepressant, but therapy plays a big role. Let's talk about some of the solutions too. What are some of those effective ways to treat depression?
Yeah. So, like you spoke to it, Thanuj, most widely used treatments for depression do include psychotherapy and medication. And so, antidepressant medications work by helping to balance the brain chemistry, while psychotherapy approaches, such as cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, offer tools to help people recognize and reframe negative thought patterns. It helps them to regulate emotions, to engage in positive behaviors, and to foster self-acceptance. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, exercise, a healthy diet, and mindfulness practices also play a supportive role.
Absolutely. And it's great to hear that there are so many paths to recovery. Nidhi, do you find that combining therapy with lifestyle changes produces the best outcome for somebody facing this condition?
Yeah, absolutely. Depression affects both the mind and the body. So, a holistic approach often works best.
Yeah. So, on that note, let's switch over to some of those practical tips for managing depression. For someone listening today who might not be ready for therapy, what are some of those small steps they can take to start managing their depression on their own?
Sure. So the first step would be to address the basics, which are sleep, nutrition, and exercise. As I mentioned earlier, these are often disrupted in a depressive episode. And if you aren't eating well or you're not sleeping well, you're unlikely to feel well. So, take steps to eat well, to hydrate adequately, to get exercise, to improve your sleep. And now, this might actually sound really overwhelming to someone who is experiencing a disruption in all of these aspects of daily living. So, the key is to set small, achievable goals or micro tasks. And so, if you want to work on exercising more, you may set a goal of walking for 5 minutes outside. If you want to improve your nutrition, you can set a goal of eating one fruit a day. So really focus on keeping the tasks small and achievable so that you're setting yourself up for success. And what you'll notice is that accomplishing that one task will build momentum to accomplish another, and it'll build confidence. And now, another tool that I found has been helpful to clients is the practice of gratitude redirection, which is where you redirect your mind from the negative thoughts you're experiencing to intentionally expressing gratitude. And you can do that for maybe one positive action that you did in the day. So, for example, you could express gratitude for drinking water. You could express gratitude for taking a shower, for stepping out of the house for a few minutes, or for reaching out to a friend. The idea here is just to pick a few things that you can say, yes, I'm grateful I took action for that, because, when you are in that depressive episode, everything does look pretty bleak. And we tend to be really self-critical during that time. So if you can practice this gratitude redirection, appreciate whatever you got done in that day, as small as it may seem, that will help lift your mood even a little bit. And then lastly, don't underestimate the power of connection. And what I mean by that is, reach out to someone that you trust and share how you feel. And I know that when, again, darkest of times, when you're feeling that depressed, it might feel really overwhelming or challenging to be that vulnerable with people. And so if that's the case for you, then I suggest, send a text, send a voice note, give the person a call. And instead of maybe even sharing how you're feeling in that moment, start with asking the person how they're doing. Because what'll happen is not only will you get distracted by hearing about somebody else and what they're going through, but just the act of supporting someone else will make you feel better. So again, I mean, the connection can be either way, where you're either providing the support to someone else or that you're accessing support from somebody else. Both are going to be really valuable in making you feel better.
Absolutely. Those are the golden words right there, the power of connection, which can go such a long way in helping someone out. And, power of connection is really the core of the therapy itself, isn't that, Nidhi?
Yeah, absolutely. If people had more social connections and felt that they could trust others, felt that they could be vulnerable with others, there would be a lot less people feeling depressed in the world.
Absolutely. But these are such powerful and yet practical tips. I really appreciate these tips for our listeners today, Nidhi. And it is so important to start with, small steps, but which has a big impact, right from the beginning. Moving over to our next section, which is more focused on encouragement and hope. Nidhi, what would you say to someone who's listening today and feeling like there is no way out of their depression?
Yeah, I tell them that depression is treatable and they really don't have to go through it alone. It is actually feels so much worse going through it alone. So, I want to remind them that seeking help is a sign of strength and not weakness. And so, even if it feels impossible now, there is hope for healing and for happiness. So I just encourage them to reach out for support, whether it's to a trusted friend or whether it's to a therapist or any medical professional. I just encourage them to reach out.
No, that's such an important message that it is important for you to reach out. It is important for you to seek help. If it is important for you to speak up. Because sometimes just hearing that, there is hope, there is connection, there is somebody to listen to you out there can make a huge difference in somebody's life. I think any final words or remarks today, Nidhi?
I think, Dhanuj, I just want to reiterate what we said already, which is that I encourage people to connect with others. I really do encourage them to do one small thing if you're really feeling kind of um, depressed, down, sad, unmotivated. Just pick one thing that you're going to do for the day, whether it's, as I said, just like picking up a glass of water and having that glass of water, whether it's getting up and just taking a whiff of fresh air. Just do one small thing and then appreciate the fact that you have the strength and the courage to do that, because it is very difficult when you're feeling that low, feeling that unmotivated, to find the energy and strength to do it. Just encourage people, please, again, reach out, connect, and of course, just do one small thing and see how that feels.
Well, Nidhi, thank you so much for your insights today and for shedding light on this deeply personal topic. I definitely think our listeners will find a lot of reassurance and guidance in what you have shared with them today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Thanaj. I want to add one thing, which is just that, as I mentioned, it's a very isolating experience to go through depression. And I want to remind listeners that there are many people who experience depressive episodes, and it feels very isolating. And yet, the reality is there are people who will understand what you're going through. And so, again, I just encourage people to connect, to seek support, and I hope that today's episode makes some listeners feel understood and empowered to take that first step toward healing.
Absolutely. It is always about the first step in reaching out and asking for help. Well, to everyone listening today, remember, depression is not a reflection of your worth. There is always help out there and there is hope. Thank you for joining us on Mind Matters today, and we'll see you until next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Nidhi.